Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm doing one of my final two off-season preview videos, and the two that are left are for the NBA Finals qualifiers. Today we're doing the loser, Miami Heat, and very soon, I'm sure you'll see the off-season preview video for the winner, the Los Angeles Lakers, but I decided to start with the Heat. This is the 30th off-season preview video that I've done. And I'm very excited to be wrapping up this series because as it has been a lot of fun, I'm excited to get into some new stuff and start some new things on the channel, especially getting into some draft coverage because there's some guys that I really like in this draft. Saddiq Bey is going to be really good. Just a little secret between me and you. But let's get into this video. We're not talking about Saddiq Bey. We're talking about the Miami Heat, and saw them have a great season. They really have some great franchise pillars in their superstar, Jimmy Butler. And when I say superstar, I mean it. This guy is incredible, and he really cemented himself in my mind as a top 10 for sure player. Maybe even higher. You'll see pretty soon I'm going to have a top 30 players in the NBA video coming out. And, well, let's just say I'm a little higher on Jimmy Butler than even most people would be following that fantastic playoff run he just had. I think that Jimmy's incredible, and my ranking of him amongst the NBA's elite will reflect that. Another pillar is Bam Adebayo. We saw this guy take a huge step forward. He got a lot of most improved player credit. I think he finished second. In my opinion, he probably should have been third because I think Jason Tatum should have won that award, and I'm very surprised that he didn't. But Bam was deserving, as well as Brandon Ingram and Jason Tatum. It just so happened that Brandon Ingram went from being a guy that LeBron wanted to trade to an all-star. And while Bam's escalation was similar, it wasn't quite on the same level as B.I., so he didn't win that award. But he did have far more team success than Brandon Ingram, as he led this Heat team, or participated in leading this Heat team to an NBA Finals berth where obviously they lost to Lakers in 6 games, but we did see him have a great playoff run. He was probably the best player in that Celtics series where we saw the Heat tear the Celtics apart because a lot of those games were really close, but we saw him particularly tear the Celtics apart. I think that's more of what I wanted to say there. And the third pillar that I really see for this team is Tyler Herro. I think that this guy showed off, what's the thing that Dave McMenamin from ESPN always says? The cojones? Tyler Herro is on the all cojones team because this guy demonstrated how gutsy he is with some of those shots he took throughout this playoff run. He's going to be a special player. We saw him take a huge step forward in between the time the season ended to when he came into the bubble. Tyler Herro is a player who's poised to have another breakout next season, and I'm very excited to see what he does down the line. Wisconsin kid right there. Wisconsin's finest. The boy wonder. That's what we all call him here. So great to see his success, and shout out to Brady Bodart for being on the Tyler Herro bandwagon from day one. But they also have a fantastic coach in Erik Spoelstra. I think that Spo is the best coach in the entire NBA, and he is, if not the biggest reason, one of the 2 or 3 biggest reasons this team made the finals. His offensive scheme is one of the best in the league. This team is just so creative, and they take advantage of their players, especially guys like Duncan Robinson, the way that Duncan moves without the ball in his hands. It all goes back to Spoelstra, who's just a basketball genius. They're lucky to have him, as there aren't guys like Erik Spoelstra on every team in the NBA, and I'm sure that he will not be going anywhere. He's a Heat for life. He's a for-lifer. Especially with his relationship with Pat Riley, who seems to also be a for-lifer with the Heat. That guy is got to be getting up there in age. But now that we've talked about what this team has had in the past, let's talk about how they can make this roster even better moving forward. In the draft, they have the 20th pick, And among guys that I could really see them getting here, there are three that I really like in particular. One, well, the first is Tyrese Maxey, who, in my opinion, is the most underrated player in this draft, aside from Sadiq Bey, but there's no way Sadiq Bey makes it to 20th, so no reason to even talk about him here. But if Maxey's on the board at 20 for the Heat, I think they need to gobble him right up, snatch him right up, because we've seen it with Kentucky guys in the past. Tyler Herro, Devin Booker. Obviously, they're not one-to-one comparisons with Maxey, but these guys have a lot of competition in college who they're competing with for shots. And with Maxey, I really like what I see. I see his jumper developing, and I see him being a really, really nice secondary ball handler for whatever team he falls on moving forward. I think that Maxey has potential to be the third best player on a championship team. And for a team that's already got two young, very, very good players in Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, as well as a current superstar in Jimmy Butler, adding another guy who can eventually play that role for you could be huge. And once again, there's that Kentucky connection. Bam, Tyler, add in Maxey, boom. That's three Kentucky guys right in their core. RJ Hampton would be the second choice for them, in my opinion. We've seen Hampton's jump shot take a big step forward, and I do think that that is something that needs to be considered. Obviously, when we saw him in NBL play, he was terrible. He was probably one of the worst players in the entire league, but he seems to have taken a step forward over the quarantine. We saw it happen with guys like Tyler Herro and Michael Porter Jr. in the NBA from the time that the season got canceled until it came back. They took huge strides in their game, and I think that we'll see a lot of similarities to that with prospects. And I think that with Hampton's jump shot development, he's one of the players that we could see have a similar adjustment. And if it's right, Hampton has some potential to be a very, very good player. And if he's on the board here at 20, I think that he is another guy that the Heat should really be looking at. My third option for them is Desmond Bane. I think that Bane is going to be an excellent professional basketball player. He's one of the best shooters in the draft, although he doesn't do much of it in motion. Catch and shoot, he's very good. And unlike a lot of the shooters in this draft, he does have some moves once he puts the ball on the floor. I shouldn't really say moves, but more of he has the ability to finish in the paint due to his strength. I mean, he's just built like Harden. Like, he is a strong guy in the upper body, and I think that that's going to bode very well for him, both finishing at the rim and on the defensive end of the floor. I think that he's going to be able to be an excellent post defender for someone his size, as well as a decent perimeter defender, as we've seen him move his feet all right in the past. I don't think that there's any kind of star potential here in the way that I think there could be with Maxey and Hampton. But I do think if you draft Desmond Bane, you're getting a solid role player who's going to be like a fifth starter or a very good player off the bench for you for years down the line. In free agency, that's where it gets interesting for this Heat team. In the outgoing, they have guys that were key to them making it to the NBA Finals. Goran Dragic. I don't know why I have so much trouble with that name, but moving on. Jay Crowder, Derrick Jones Jr., Meyers Leonard, Solomon Hill. There's lots of guys that got either key minutes in their regular season rotation or their playoff rotation. Obviously, Goran Dragic was one of their best players in this playoff run. He was their leading scorer up until the time he went down with his plantar fascia injury. I do think that I would be very cautious about paying him for multiple years down the line, both because you want to leave some cap space open for the summer of 2021 and all of the fantastic star players that are going to be free agents in that offseason, but also because he's getting old. We saw him have an injury there, and I'm not sure I want to be a person who's paying Goran Dragic. I think he's 34 right now. I don't really want to be paying him through like his age 37 or 38 season. So if I'm the Heat, I'd be very cautious about the kind of deal I give him. I think a perfect kind of thing would be like a 2-year, $36 million deal with either a team option or a partial guarantee on the second season so that you can cut him to free up some cap space, although he probably would be pretty tradable as an expiring after the second year, or after the first year, excuse me. So then you could trade him to free up some cap space, but I don't think I would want to give him much more than a 2 or 3 year deal because I just don't believe that he's going to be the same type of impact player at the end of that deal. And like I said before, you do want to have that cap space open. Jay Crowder is another one I would really think twice before paying a large amount of money to, largely because we did see his limitations in the playoffs. He's a great defender and he works very hard, so I do think they should bring him back unless they can bring in Jeremy Grant, because Jeremy Grant would be a huge upgrade from Jay Crowder, and he's much younger, he's a better player. So if Jeremy Grant wants to come to Miami and somehow they're able to lure him away from Denver, that'd be perfect. That'd be like the best fit ever. But otherwise, yeah, you should probably bring Jay Crowder back. But once again, I would try to keep it on a short-term deal, maybe like a 2-year, $10 million deal. I don't think that Jay Crowder's value is worth much more than that. Maybe it's more like 2 years at the mid-level exception, which is like $10 million, so it's like 2 years, $20 million. But once again, I think you want to have like a team option or a partial guarantee on that second year, because you don't really want to be doling out large sums of money to Jay Crowder, and they already do have a lot of cap space taken up by things like the Andre Iguodala deal. Although that will probably be tradable after this year. Or even, I think it's a team option, so maybe even this year, as it could be considered an expiring, but Iggy's still a good player, so I think they would want to keep him around. Derrick Jones Jr., I don't particularly think is a guy that they're going to be able to hang on to, just because there's a lot of teams that have some cap space, teams like Atlanta, Detroit, New York, and are in a position where they should be adding young talent. And Derrick Jones Jr. is one of the few guys that I really think is worth paying if you're a team that has cap space this offseason. I think that something in the range of 3 years at the mid-level for Derrick Jones could be perfect. Maybe it's a little less than the mid-level. So like 3 years, $25 million. That would make a lot of sense to me from a team like Detroit or a team like Atlanta, especially Atlanta, because he could fit in perfectly into their front court alongside, as another option alongside guys like John Collins, Clint Capella, as well as their guys that they took in the first round last year in DeAndre Hunter and in Cam Reddish. As well as whoever they take with the 6th pick this year, and I really like Tyrese Halliburton there. But back to the Heat, Derrick Jones Jr. is going to be hard to keep around. Meyers Leonard was a starter for them this season. He didn't do much in the playoffs, and I think that Kelly Olynyk is a similar player to him and is also a better player than him. So if they're bringing him back for anything more than the minimum, I would be a little surprised. But if Meyers Leonard wants to stick around for the minimum or like the biannual exception, which pays around $3 million per year, something like that, sure, keep him around. Solomon Hill's the last one, similar to Meyers, biannual exception, minimum contract, something like that. Solomon got some minutes in the playoffs, but he didn't impress whatsoever in those minutes. He was really just a guy who played kind of a small ball 5 kind of role when Spoelstra wasn't comfortable putting Olynyk out on the court. In terms of their targets, I really think it's retaining their outgoing. Unless they believe Tyler Herro can play point guard, in that case, they could really just let Goran Dragic walk, because trotting out a starting lineup of Herro, Robinson, Butler, Adebayo, and Olynyk could be very, very enticing for this team moving forward, assuming they want to keep Adebayo at the 4 during the regular season. Otherwise, it would be Adebayo at the 5 and like Jay Crowder, Iguodala at the 4. But if they still believe that Herro is a 2, which I probably do, I still think that you should have someone else who can run the point. As we saw Herro make some very questionable turnovers in the Lakers series. So I do think they should retain Dragic, but like I said, be careful about paying him too far down the line. Retain Jay Crowder unless you can upgrade on him. Gallinari could be an option, but I would stay away from that because you've got enough offensive-minded guys on this team. You really don't need another scorer, and Gallo could take away some of the defense. In that way, I do think that Paul Millsap could be kind of a perfect guy for them if they could coax him into taking a short-term, high-paying deal. Like, if you give him $20 million for a year, he might accept that as just a final year of getting paid. And he could fit in very, very well with this team as the starting 4 guy. Bring the same kind of role as Jay Crowder, but be a significant upgrade on the offensive end of the floor because Millsap's a better shooter and probably better in the paint too. While still playing the same physical defense as Jay Crowder, I do think that he could be a perfect addition. But obviously the salary cap is a thing, and they can't pay everyone, but bringing in Paul Millsap instead of Crowder could be interesting. However, I don't think they'd be able to afford him if they bring back a guy like Dragic. If they let Dragic walk, then they could bring in Millsap and have a lineup of Herro, Robinson, Butler, Millsap, and Adebayo. I think that would be completely nasty, but if they don't want Herro to play the point, you bring back Dragic, and that means that you probably don't have room for Paul Millsap. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. The Heat have a very promising future with their current superstar core of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, as well as their future star core of Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to from this team, and I'm excited to see what happens. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. That's it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all again very soon.